Today's session is how to run successful hybrid meetings with Corey Laparty from Hawks Prairie Rotary. Most of you are familiar with Corey, but some of you may not be.
Thank you, Stephen, for that, and thank you all for being here today. So what we're going to cover today is what is a hybrid or a virtual in-person meeting. Often referred to as a VIP meeting, but we're also going to talk about technical tips for different setups for clubs, and some tips for better hybrid meetings and how to engage online participants. And we'll also have a couple of chances for you to ask questions throughout the session. So let's talk about what a hybrid or a virtual in-person meeting actually is. So these are meetings held both in person and on Zoom in real time. And the key here is that they're not passive experiences like you may have held in meetings in the past. So if you've broadcast your meeting in the past, say via Facebook Live or on YouTube, that's not what we're talking about here today. These are active participant meetings. And the whole reason for VIP meetings is to support member engagement and retention. So when we talk about in the room at the in-person meeting, you're going to need to set a setup that includes laptops, projection, or an LCD screen. And you're going to need to make sure that announcements and presenters can be clearly seen and heard by your online participants. And you want to be thoughtful about your agenda and how it will relate to your online as well as in-person participants. It's going to require some extra personnel, cost, and more setup than your club may be used to. Your online participants will be interacting just like we are here today, and the AV setup in the room will allow them to see and hear what's going on just as if they were there in person. Now this is going to create dynamic interactions with all participants. It will require using a paid Zoom account by the club, but the District 502 has made one available to each area, and your AG knows how to hook you up. So if you didn't know already that there is one, your AG can hook you up. Now let's take a look at the different setups you can use depending on your club's needs. And you can see right here, this is a Zoom meeting that was taking place back in the fall, back when a lot of clubs were able to try out this whole hybrid model. And we'll be using some of them as a way to show things off. So the first is a simple setup. Now this is one of our District 5020 clubs. The setup is for small clubs under 20 members and really doesn't require anything that you don't already have. The members who feel comfortable meeting in person can just bring their own devices and log in just as if they were at home. Now the key here is that only one person has their audio turned on or you're going to get some crazy feedback at the in-person meeting. The setup also works just fine for committee meetings. So even if you've got a bigger club, but say you have committees of 10 or less, you may consider hybrid options for your committee meetings. Now the next is a basic setup. And for this, you'll want to use a projector and screen at your meeting venue. And you can use a cell phone on a stand, sometimes pointing at whoever is speaking. The key there is to make sure that cell phone can be turned towards your audience as well as your speaker. You want to make sure that speakers and people asking questions step up to the microphone and talk right towards the camera so that at-home attendees can see and hear them well. This setup works for clubs in the 20 to 30 member range as long as you're not having a meal at the same time. That meal at the same time tends to create a lot of background noise, and that makes it really hard for the online participants to hear what's going on in the room, even if you have a good room mic, but you need to have a bit better setup for that. So this setup works for clubs in the 20 to 30 member range. So the advanced setup you see here is from last fall when Rotary 1 in Chicago was testing out hybrid meetings. It's your typical projector and screen setup, but they also have multiple laptops, an audio and video mixer, and cameras on tripods. Now this setup does require some pre-meeting setup. It requires a trained team, and it'll take some more that we'll talk about a little bit later. And as you can see there, they're using audio and video mixers to make sure all of this funnels into one. Now the final setup is for if you have a venue or a member that already has a conference room set up with the Zoom room camera. Now these Zoom rooms, they'll allow about 10 people or so to be in person and viewing at home members on an LCD screen, as you see here in the photo. And then the Zoom camera moves around to focus on whoever's speaking. We're going to take a look now at a demonstration of how you can have an interactive virtual in-person or hybrid meeting. The following video is material from the Global Impact Group. It's been edited down by myself for, they had a presentation that was about 26 minutes long. I didn't figure we wanted to watch 26 minutes of video. So this is about 4 minutes that gives you the idea of the type of setup an average sized club might use.
This video shows one of 35,000 Rotary Club meetings taking place every week in 190 countries around the world with our 1.2 million members improving health, peace, our environment, education, and more.
Today is different, however. Today is a virtual in-person meeting.
This means that members may participate from the safety of their homes while connecting and speaking with members who are present at the meeting.
The Global Impact Group has teamed up with La Miranda Sunrise Rotary Club in California to create this video and to include a lineup of world-renowned speakers to tell a story of inspiration and aspiration for global health.
By the end of this video, you'll see both the simplicity
and the power of virtual connectivity.
For ourselves, for our communities, and for the world. Let's join our virtual in-person club meeting.
Welcome Rotarians and guests, and greetings from La Miranda Sunrise Rotary Club at the garage of one of our members' homes. Today we have a landmark meeting for two reasons. First, we are being filmed to show how a virtual in-person meeting works, and second, we have a story of the history and future of public health with a group of world-renowned thought leaders joining us virtually across both space and time. I would like to introduce Jim Margroff to explain today's program and introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Conrad. The purpose of today's meeting is to show Rotary clubs around the world how easy it is to add virtual connection to your in-person meetings.
We start with our basic laptop, projector, speaker, and screen. We connect our laptop to our Zoom meeting. Then we plug in a high-quality microphone and a webcam facing our in-person members and guests. Finally, your president faces their laptop towards themselves, and a Zoom master, in person or virtual, runs the meeting. This is the setup we're using for this video. So in review, all that's needed to run a VIP meeting, beyond the laptop, speaker, projector, and screen that most clubs have, is a microphone, a webcam, a second laptop for the president, and a third laptop for a Zoom master. And note that the president or Zoom master could be physically present in the meeting or remote connected on Zoom. Now let's provide some detail on the mic and webcam. We recommend a Blue Yeti omnidirectional microphone. When centrally located, it can capture audio from anyone speaking in the room and is the only microphone used. We recommend a Logitech C920 webcam given its cost, resolution, and field of view positioned next to the screen. Now let's provide some detail on Zoom settings for the three laptops. The club laptop must be configured in Zoom to use the external webcam and microphone. The president's laptop should have its microphone on mute and audio off. The Zoom master should also have their microphone on mute and audio off. Finally, the club laptop should be set to speaker view within Zoom, and the president should be on Zoom speaker view. The magic in this setup is that the webcam and mic allow remote participants to see and hear all in-person members, and in-person members can see remote Zoom participants on the screen. Proper placement of the webcam and mic allow anyone in person to step forward facing the webcam and screen and speak to all virtual participants while also being seen on the screen by in-person participants. If a club wants to accommodate more than 50 or even 100 people, depending upon the number of Zoom participants, a more sophisticated configuration can be used.
As our clubs resume meeting in person, we must continue to provide virtual access to support our most vulnerable members and to open our doors for greater inclusion, embracing our interdependence and our power of our common Rotary voice.
This is an image from Oak Bay Rotary when they were allowed to have hybrid meetings. They were limited to 20 members per meeting in person, mandated by the hotel. and had several policies in place like no singing, no passing of items, no handshakes, hugs, symptom checks, hand sanitizers, etc. So those are definitely things that you want to think about. So let's look at some tips for you to take prior to your hybrid meetings. You want to make sure that you send out meeting invites well in advance, especially if your in-person meeting space has an attendance limit. That may be where you come up. I saw a question in the chat is how do you decide? Maybe it's on a first come first serve. Maybe it's on a rotating schedule. But if you don't put out those meeting invites well in advance, people don't have a chance to opt in or opt out of meeting in person. You want to make sure to reach out to members who are Zooming to make sure they haven't had any difficulties with Zoom. And I've heard a lot of conversation and seen a lot in the chat about that and about teaching our members how to use Zoom. You also want to send out your agenda in advance. I think Jan touched on this. In advance of meetings so members at home can follow along. And you want to make sure that you test your setup well in advance as well, so that when you get to the meeting date, you don't go, oh, well, it's not working. I guess those at-home people are just going to miss out today. Because that's the worst thing we can do, is not provide a good experience for the people who can't make it to the meeting in person or don't feel comfortable to make it there. So during your hybrid meeting, you want to be conscious to incorporate your online members into the meeting, like we've said, and make sure speakers use the microphone. We all know that there's those presenters that say they are loud enough, they can speak without it. This doesn't work at all when you've got people Zooming in trying to hear what's going on. You want to make sure that the whole room can be seen with your camera or phone. And like we said before, if there's going to be meals and background noise, you need to have a more advanced mic setup than just the one we had in the video. There was the mention of doing some phasing with mics. You'll need somebody who understands electronics and how to rewire a microphone to make that happen. There's not a specific device for that. And you also want to remember to keep your presentations shorter than you might have in the past, especially if you have a speaker attending virtually. They may have a deadline, and if you're taking time out of a meeting time for people to eat or to do other things, there's not going to be as much time for a speaker as maybe we've had in the past. Some tips. You probably need to have a dedicated Ethernet connection, and we talked about that. And your Zoom master is going to need to act as your virtual host or greeter. That's one of the reasons to have that position, is to decide. I saw a question about who decides who gets pinned or who gets featured, and that's your Zoom master's job to do that and to understand what's going on. But they're also the virtual greeter to make sure that everybody who's attending via Zoom doesn't have questions, is being taken care of, that their technology is working like Stephen is doing for us here today. Without that, you've just got a bunch of boxes of people on the screen that aren't any more interactive than if they were just viewing this passively, and we want to avoid that. So our district has a tech team that can assist you with any further questions about hybrids. There are tech resources also on our Zoom website, which is listed here. And I also wanted to include the info for the Global Impact Group. And I said I would put it in the chat, so here it is, thegig.org, the Global Impact Group. And you can watch their 26-minute hybrid meeting that they did. They had RI President Holger on that meeting. They had John Hugo on that meeting. They had past RI presidents as well as people from public health all over the world. So it's an interesting meeting. Topic-wise, it was a bit long for today's, but you can really see the benefit of having an in-person and a virtual meeting going on at the same time. As well, follow-up materials will be made available, including this slide deck, as well as some equipment suggestion guides.